keeping well and staying safe. My name is Rashmi and welcome to the session brought to you by Recro. Today we will be discussing about how to structure your tech team to scale. It's a task that has become more challenging and complex because of the remote work environment that we find ourselves in. Thank you so much once again for joining us. Hope you have you hope you're having a good time and hope you take a lot from today's session, right? So let me quickly get started with who we are and let me introduce our panelists for the day as well. So those who don't know what Recro is and who we are, a quick introduction here. We are a developer-focused platform wherein we are connecting talented developers with fast-growing startup. Currently, we are helping 100 plus high-growth startup meet their engineering talent requirement. So that's what we do here at Recro. Introducing our guest panelists for today. First and foremost, we have Emily Hoang with us. Emily is a VP Engineering at Metadata. She's having 5 years of experience in managing and scaling distributed engineering teams and 12 plus of experience into working with large-scale consumer-facing mobile and web application. Thank you so much, Emily, for taking out the time and joining us in this panel discussion. You may go ahead and say hi to the audience.
Hi, hi everyone. My name is Emily Hoang. Thank you for the intro. I'm very excited to be here today. Thank you.
Awesome. Next, we have Brian McDonald with us. Brian is a VP at Opus One Solution. He is having extensive experience again and is into product leader with deep history in product management, user experience, design, and data science that includes senior roles ranging from startups in agriculture and renewable energy to largest enterprise organization. Thank you so much, Brian, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. Really looking forward to the discussion. I mean, it couldn't be more topical. So, welcome the other panelists and the everyone in the audience.
Next, we have Nizer joining us. He is working with Metadata again, and he is working as a senior product manager. Again, he's having 8 plus years of experience, and he is constantly trying to find better ways to deliver product into the market. Welcome to the discussion, Andre. You may go ahead and say hi again.
Hey, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity.
Last but not the least, we have Shubham Rastogi joining us. He is the founder and CEO at Recro. He will be hosting today's session as well. And with the help of Recro, he is helping talented developers thrive by giving them the right exposure and matching them with the right opportunities. Thank you so much, Shubham, for joining us.
Thanks, Ashmi, for the intro. Thank you.
So let's get started, everyone. I'll pass on the stage to Shubham now, and he'll take over.
Running straight into business, setting the context up for the meet today. First of all, thanks everyone for joining and taking out your valuable time for this event. I would like to start off by giving a brief context in terms of the world has changed and pretty much we have been living into this new distributed world, right? Post-pandemic and after COVID-19, we are in a completely new scenario. So the remote work or distributed work has brought up new challenges at engineering, product design at almost all levels in all tech companies. And we wanted to have inputs coming in from different global players who are there. So starting off with Emily, I would like to understand a bit in terms of what are the major considerations or what are the major changes that you have done in your organization post the pandemic era, and how do you see that scaling up in the upcoming times?
Hi, everybody. So my engineering team worked completely remote in the very beginning. So to be honest, the pandemic did not affect us at all. I built a team from I started hiring from the global network, so it has been the beginning, and we're growing from like a 2-people team up to now 20 different team members across the globe. So we have like 11 different country and 9 different time zone. So it was very excited. The challenge. Sorry, I'm not sure I was answering the questions directly, but
no,
yes.
Sure. So you are on point. We do understand that you have been, and it's even more beneficial for us to have someone who has already, let's say, started from day one on that path. A lot of us are transitioning into that mode, right? But obviously you have a remote first kind of a mentality from day one, right? So that definitely adds. So just wanted to know, because you have, prior to your current company Metadata, right, I think you have a lot of experience in other companies as well. What are the major changes that you see? What different when you compare your experience working in a physical location, or let's say building a remote first organization? So if you can give some insights on that.
Remote first organization have its pro and cons, right? First of all, you have to know what your best practice in terms of, financial operations, because you tap into the global market. Is a lot more financial friendly for a startup. However, you have to consider on how do you work across time zone. So communication was key for us to make sure, we always communicate on Slack. And Andre can add in more of those flavor. But yes, communicate across time zone and how to operate the entire team to make sure we have 24 hours. Right now in my team, we have 24 hours coverage, because we have some people who's on PST, which is the startup in San Francisco, whereas we have other team member on, Europe area, Canada. So we always have this coverage that somebody go to sleep, somebody start the day, and then we can always have our process projects been taken care of.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. No, got it. Andre, like, if you would also like to add a bit on this, right, in terms of metadata.
Yeah, exactly. When comparing to past experiences when we had physical locations to metadata, and I can tell by my experience when I joined at Metadata, I was transitioning from the physical locations into a fully remote position. And what is the main difference? You cannot stand up from your desk and ask for help from someone sitting your side. You have to drop a message in a virtual place called Slack.
Correct.
And then the answer may not come when you need that exactly. Then you need to increase the communication in a way that people pay attention to whenever is needed. But that is a thin line, and what is needed, what is not needed to pay attention every single moment. Then we have to invest a lot in offline communication, what it means, document everything, organize it way and concise way and complete way. So whenever someone needs an answer, they can easily jump in any material and get that answer. It's really different when you have someone sitting at your side and then you're just tap on their arm saying, hey, can you help me here? And that's the main change. Document everything, organize everything, and then invest a lot on asynchronous communication.
Yeah, so async in terms of communication has obviously been a big thing that needs to be implemented. So Andre, what was it a part of your culture? Did you guys specifically do something to implement that kind of a culture, or because it doesn't come naturally to write documents to developers, right? There is a lot of friction that also comes in when you talk about that. So were there any specific measures that you took at the organization level to implement async, and how did you motivate everyone in the team to do that, or was it like a top to down approach where you mandated it across the team?
Yeah, for any agile process, I would say we are all in the same level and we try to find the best way to communicate with each other. So we need to listen to every single person in the team and to define what would be, for example, the common format to get a requirement to a development team so they can proper create the solutions. And once we settle that, that's our asynchronous communication will be done in a way that everyone agree and everyone understand the format. It requires a lot of back and forth during the setup stage, and it's a living thing. Every single sprint or release cycle, we are adjusting the way we communicate to each other. But the overall simple idea is find the best way by talking to your team members, figure out how they want to read it and what type of information is needed. So then tomorrow, when they are in a different time zone, they can quickly look into that while you're not available because you're in a different time zone. And then the asynchronous communication works.
Got it. Brian, you have, I think, the most experience here. Worked around different kind of companies across different geographies, right? What's your take on this? I think you would also be a little new to the concept. Obviously, you would have done some form of it here and there. But what's your take on the post-COVID world that we are now moving
Yeah,
towards?
no, absolutely. I think picking up on some of the themes from Andre and Emily as well. I think what's really important, and I've been through this, multiple occasions at Oracle. I mean, we had 147,000 people spread out across, development teams, and there was an amorphous quality to the engineering teams. You would start projects, you would build in teams, you would pull groups from different organizations, you would deliver to product teams on different time zones. And subsequently leaving Oracle, working with a couple of different startups, I've seen this materialize in very much the same way. Whether we, most recently at Opus One, we've had to substantially bring in an outsourced team to, expand due to product and, project demands. And I think stepping back a little bit, I agree with the communication. I agree with the dialogue. I mean, those are also, and we can certainly touch on those. The one thing that I keep coming back to, though, is when you set up the remote teams and the organizations, there's always an implicit discussion about power sharing. And I think it's a really interesting concept about once you start distributing the teams, you have to make a conscious choice about, whether you're HQ or you're outsourcing or you're the product manager or you're the engineering lead. At some point, you have to make the decision how much you're going to trust the remote teams and what relationship you're going to have with the people who are deciding the work allocation, the go-to-market delivery, the release process, the customer value. So I think this is actually the central decision that needs to be made by the leadership, but even the teams themselves. I mean, I've seen it play out time and time again. We recently, again, outsourced to a team in the Ukraine. And I mean, the conscious decision, I think there were forces in the company who wanted to say, oh, just write some detailed requirements, throw it over the wall. We just need the people. And it's like, no. If you want to be a feature factory, awesome. We can do that. I mean, we can certainly, if you want to just deal with burn down rates, we can do that. But what we did, though, is we said, okay, well, let's get the engineers, let's bring them under the umbrella, let's make them a part of our business, let's take the time to explain what we're trying to accomplish and see how that plays out. And we were we're in a complex business of distributed energy systems, markets, there's a lot going on. I mean, but people are smart. I mean, people can do things. And it was amazing to watch the transition of the team once they kind of said, oh, okay, this is a lot like fintech, it's a marketplace, I get it. And then by about 3 to 4 months into bringing them on board, we were able to actually have the team guiding integration discussions with some of the remote partners. They were, being able to set up metric conversations with what we were trying to accomplish. And in truth, what we built was a truly functional team that in turn we're able to expand out and sort of make more part of our business. So, and again, I saw this at Oracle when we started the machine learning team. I mean, the first team was quite small, and then we brought in Guadalajara, and then we had a team in Hyderabad, and we expanded to Europe as well. And we had to consciously decide, okay, well, is it HQ or is it going to be the team in Guadalajara? Can we honestly trust this relationship? And I think that is really the key part as leaders, as engineering leaders, and is to decide how you're going to involve and truly engage with the teams.
I think that's an excellent insight in terms of one of the key takeaways from your talk, Brian, comes out is one is how much do you trust your people, and distributed teams is more about distribution of power as well, right? Right. I think that's something that's very deep in terms of how do you build cultures and how do you distribute power, because a lot of times there is centralization of power even within teams, right? In terms of decision making or.
It's a tough one. I mean, people who have power don't want to give it up. I mean, your product, I mean, talk about product managers. I mean, we're like slaves to this. I mean, it's all we've got at times is to be able to decide what to do.
That works almost in every human aspects that we are dealing with.
True.
Cool. I'll now take up the next question. I'll give a little bit of context in terms of So, and this is specifically for Andre, comes from a product background, and obviously Brad, you also, but I'd just like to start with Andre on this. Andre, in terms of product, and what Brian also mentioned, that he got the entire team with the business to understand what the business is all about and then let people figure it out. For product teams, what we would have seen, right, ideally you would meet a lot of users, right, to have that kind of a feedback loop, right? But what we have seen over with COVID happening, and these interactions have become virtual, right, in a particular sense. So as a product manager, how do you handle the feedback loop, or how do you do your design thinking workshops and stuff like that with all virtual? Has that been a challenge for you, or are there ways how we can mitigate that lack of physical, I would say, camaraderie, or what we should say, in terms of the physical feel that you get, right, once you are interacting face to face with a particular user in a process?
Sure. Yeah, it's a challenge, but we have to see that as an opportunity. You can reach more people in less time, and that's the key. You don't need to travel or need to set up a physical room to move people into one single place to handle some user interview process, feedback process. You can do that virtually. And it's important, of course, when you're using Zoom or any other video tool, that you have your camera on so you can read the person, not just listen to what they're saying. And this is something that we usually enforce when we're trying to communicate with end users. Like if you want to make a virtual session, that always need to have your cameras on so we can look into their eyes, even if virtually. But there's a lot of emotions and things you capture from the person and not necessarily from what they are typing to you. And this is why it's important to make that via video and not voice only. There's a challenge, but there's a lot of opportunity too. We can reach people in the other side of the globe in a matter of a second, and that's priceless.
Got it. Brand, how you have been dealing on this side, do you invite people to offices, or is there a way to do that virtually? Do you agree with that? How has your experience been on that side?
Yeah, I mean, it's much the same. I think in many respects, I mean, I love the fact, remote in many respects, whether it's sales, customer access, dialogue, it's kind of been a forcing factor in many respects that in the past, I mean, there was a certain element of, in order to visit a customer, you got on a plane and you spent some time, and you went to Glasgow or New York or Singapore or wherever it was, and there was sort of this understanding that you had to sit down and kind of whiteboard, and there's certainly a tremendous value in doing that, both for sales and product, and I mean the interview process is for product discovery or UX design reviews is exactly the same. And I love the fact that there's now an openness to engage with customers that maybe hadn't been as much in the past. And I think that's been a very much a forcing function to allow to open these summer doors. The other thing I will say that, especially it's sort of part of the whole remote conversation as well, is that your process also has to be on point. I mean, so you have to decide all the things that were kind of luxury items if you were if you're showing up in an office and kind of winging it. I mean, there's kind of a saying, if you're a runner, you're not going to show up at the start line and miracle your way to finishing a marathon. It's exactly the same thing with remote work. You just, if you flew to New York and sat in the office for 2 days, you might come away with something of value. If you only have an hour session with a customer, you have to be more structured, you have to be more detailed, and you have to have things like customer value, North Star metrics. What are you actually trying to accomplish out of this? So if you're looking to try and build retention, if you're looking to try and upsell or improve the engagement metrics, you have to go in with those things in mind and be very purposeful about it. And I think those process and those drivers has to be pushed across the teams as well. So whether they're whether it's UX or data science or engineering, those have to be really a part of the wider conversations as well.
Got it. Thanks. Emily, wanted to ask you a bit in terms of the hiring part, right? I think in India at least, it's been a big challenge because of the kind of startup boom that we are seeing here. I think we have heard about similar sentiments across different nations as well. From your perspective, like just wanted to understand, like when you're hiring, like what is the kind of challenges that you're facing in the current market, and also like are there any ways or that you can share that how do you, like for example, you would have your own process to hire people, because as you mentioned, you are hiring from 11 different countries. So that means 11 different cultures, and all of these are getting vetted through a particular screening process that you would have, and a selection process that you would have built in terms of hiring. So can you show some light on that as well? Like what is the kind of recruiting process that you have in place for specifically for tech roles?
So we actually recruiting globally.
Yes.
So in the job description, we always clarify, hey, you need to overlap at least up to noon PST. That is the minimum requirement. So that is very clear, that is very clear on the requirement. And we posted the job opening in like remote work, a lot of like remote site and Ukrainian website, etc. Right, so everywhere, and we collect all of the candidates from when they apply for the position. They will answering the question, their resume, everything. So we track the pool of the talents that interested in the positions. Then normally at least for the senior engineering that we have opening, we have them do a take home test. We review the take homes, and at the end, if the take home is in a good quality, we will send them into the technical interview route. So normally we have like 3-4 technical, and we would have a personality kind of to see like if there's a culture fit with the team. So that process we have been done and since good result across QA, tech support, developers across, like for the team itself. So that is our current processes. I think PM on our side is similar as well. So we do a lot of interviewing to make sure the candidates are technically qualified, logically, logical thinkings, and have that proactive mindset, right? So that's how we currently do at Metadata.
Andre, like any insights on how are you hiring your teams, right? In terms of what kind of processes have you built to hire in this world?
We actually really liked referrals from our current team members, because if you work with somebody else before, is you can know how the quality of working. But for the processes, that's the main interview process was built, and then so it's pretty. For me, it's very straightforward, like in terms of like set up the interview and all of and each group will have cross-functional interviewing each other. So for example, I would always have like a PM to interview an engineer, because since we are cross-functional team, you will work within that, that team, right? So you have to be able to communicate with QA and PM and, DevOps, for example.
I think that's quite interesting in terms of involving the PM teams as well, in terms of when you're like interviewing engineers. And even it's because engineers also want to, what we have seen even when we are working, like they want to understand the impact of their work and understand the business problem as well. Sometimes in the traditional model, you see you had business analysts, or you had a certain layer that used to interact with the business teams, right? What we are seeing now more and more, that is where you want your engineers to directly interact with the business teams that are there. So Andre, like, are you a part of these interviews as well?
Yes, exactly. For example, when we are hiring product managers, we also send them to the engineering team to be interviewed as well. It's two-way. Yeah, exactly.
PM should also understand tech, right? A lot of new age, even in Southeast Asia, I've seen a lot of companies have a specific policy to have tech PMs as well, and that's written in the JD, right? The guy, the PM, who is PM, has to have some sort of tech background. So I think it's a I would say a fusion of both happening at both the ends, which is good. Brand, your take on this? Like, how are you hiring people, and what kind of processes are you building up?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think the first off, hiring, I mean, trying not to cry. I mean, in Toronto, it's been such a challenge with trying to find people. I mean, not just Toronto. I mean, my last startup was in Vancouver, which we were fighting with AWS for every person. I mean, in Toronto, it's just nuts. So I think the worldwide sort of hiring thing, I think, is certainly a thing. Pre-COVID, we had at Equation, again, one of the startups after Oracle, we actually had a really nice immigration path where that actually turned out to be a path we pursued pretty aggressively, where we actually brought some folks in from Brazil and India, and I think that worked out really well. But from an expectation perspective, I mean, I've done a lot of thinking recently about the approach that some of the the Facebooks and Googles of the world have taken. I mean, the notion of having critical thinking, framework-driven interviews. I mean, even sort of forcing people to kind of not just interview from their resume, but actually, take a run at not just a coding exercise, but do a use case. I mean, whether it's a 20-minute, show me how you think, is versus, or here's a product case, kind of come back with it. Here's a take-home assignment. I mean, it sounds like overhead, but it's worth doing. And I think what it really does is it forces the person who you're talking to get their thoughts down on paper or to communicate it. And in the end, that's going to be the work. I mean, if they're going to be remote or different time zones, I mean, they have to be able to explore, understand the problem, be able to communicate. In order for the one-pagers to work, they have to be well structured. I'm not looking for someone who take 4 weeks to come away with an answer. Really looking for can be dynamically part of them. That has to come out of the interview process. Another thing that we've done at both recent companies is definitely really invest in the onboarding process as well. So things such as at Equation, we had a combination of hardware, firmware, and software. It had data science, machine learning. I mean, it would robots in agriculture, like it was crazy. So when we bring people on, quite often they would be, there was a lot to sort of take in. So what we would do is actually have a follow the data process where we would guide people through over the course of a week, really understand and deconstruct the problem that what the customers are trying to solve. And then at the end of it, they actually had at least some context to go around. And I think that was really invaluable for getting those first, 2 to 3 to 4 weeks, the first couple of months productivity, and then eventually also setting the standards that we want you part of the outcome, part of the problem, part of the solution, not just someone to execute. And I think that was a huge part. I mean, a huge win. And it also got a chance for people to show off what they're doing. And I think it was always a sort of a really welcome part of the process as well.
That also helps them to zoom out a bit. Like sometimes you see the too zoomed in, right, in terms of the work that they're doing, and developers definitely do get into a zone, right? And sometimes you want them to just get them zoomed out and see the bigger picture, how those things are going on across the org, right?
I mean, it's completely true. I mean, I think Marty Kagan's right. I mean, the product teams have to be a blend of they've got to be engaged. They've got to be part of the customer process. Whether they're actually on customer success calls or they're fixing issues, or you have to understand if somebody's screaming, there's a reason for it. Or if they're not getting value out of the heat map that you've just built, it's because it's not responsive enough because you're in a different setting, or it's the fonts are too, whatever the reason might be, those have to be part of the considerations and not just, hey, I've implemented something. So yeah, I think the more you can make them part of what it is that you do, that makes everyone part of the culture and sort of opens up the possibility to being actually part of the wider organization.
And also, Emily, I just wanted to understand your view on terms of like how much is like in India, at least I think like temporary workforce or probably gigs and freelancing haven't really picked up that well. But at least I've heard quite a bit in Europe and US, it's pretty norm. But how much contribution do you feel like right now you have from gigs or gigsters or probably from freelancers or temp workforce in that matter? And have you utilized any aspect of that in your current tech team or in your
the challenging about if I understand your questions right, is more like a short-term hiring. Is that correct?
Correct.
The challenge about short-term hiring is that our infrastructure is way too complicated to have something short-term. So I always looking for hiring full-time, because it takes 3 months to actually onboard, to actually see the entire infrastructure, right? We have, 12 different microservices. So, and then across different teams. So it's to hire a short-term contractors is you have to have like an independent projects that can be like plug and play into the main system. So if you hire a role for the main system, that person have to be on board, have to be trained, have to be well-versed in the entire projects, whereas you can have like a small part for an independent contractor. So far we use Upwork, for some QA work, for some minor data cleaning work, but not much on the engineering side. We do have like part-time to full-time hire, right? So like try out for the first 3 months, give some small bucks, and then say, hey, you're good. Let's go full-time on board. Actually, on the other hand, one more thing is we do have a team before, but not anymore. What we want to recreate it is an experimental team. So that team will be always building POC, right? We have brand new idea. Let's try it out. That doesn't have to be production ready code. So let's try it out and see if the idea works. So those are the things that we can potentially use for the part-time.
Truly understand. I think that's the reason we also do not encourage a lot of short-term gigs at Recro. Same reasons, because ideally it takes some time for people to ramp up in terms of to understand what the business needs are, and by the time they become productive, the gig is over otherwise, right? So even we at Recro generally look out for longer gigs, at least 6 months or more, and I think that's a very, very valid point that you put across. Brian, your take on this as well, and after that I'll come to Andre as well on how have you guys looked at, let's say, freelancing options or
hard no on this one. I mean, I'll even take the next step of we've actually even had a couple of overflow engineers locally, and I mean, in the end, if they're good, you want to keep them, and if they're not good, you're like tempted to not make the investment. And if you brought them in, you still have the overhead of the interview process or the outsourcer who's gone through that. So you're either trusting the outsourcer, and so it's almost never great. I mean, even if they're productive, it's still it's always that level of investment. How far are you going to go to pull them into sort of the group? For as I said, the most successful recent experience was we get a team in the Ukraine, what we outsourced to. And I think what this company did really well, which I really liked, which was they offered up a complete team and not just people. And I think what I really liked about it is that there was the cohesion within the team. They had a PO, they had QA, they actually had like a fully functional group that was almost the polar opposite of the individual sort of gig sort of oriented people. So what we were doing was onboarding a whole team as opposed to trying to onboard a bunch of sort of individual pieces. So inevitably, as a company, you choose your investments, you choose to prioritize where you're going to make it. And the gig stuff, I mean, even for the smallest things, I'm going to say hard no.
Got it. So that's the thing here is, like, you look at when you're trying to get people from outside, you look at, is the execution getting handled or not, right? Yeah. Or in a particular sense, you don't need to manage again the folks that are coming. If that can be handled, is what you're looking at when you look at the entire team coming along, instead of just individuals, right? Andre, your take on that? Like, what's your experience been on that front in product side, on the product side?
Very much the same. When having like freelancing, even in product side, in the past was very common to hire, for example, designers freelance to interact and do some quick things, but it's really hard to create consistency. And because every now and then you bring someone else with a different mind and different ideas, then after a few iterations, you are lost in a spaghetti of different variations and combinations of solutions. And this is why it's not that practical to have freelancing as well, to reduce the consistency.
Got it. I think we are all in agreement on that side.
Yeah.
Let's move to the next thing. And we'll keep it quick. So just wanted to understand from you guys, right, in terms of future of work, what are the top 2 or 3 things that you think in the future trends in terms of work that are going to be very, very prominent? Andre, if you can tell 2 or 3 things that come right in the top of your mind. And
reinvention, that's the future of work number 1. Companies need to reinvent themselves. We never know when the next pandemic will change the status quo, and we need to think fast and invest a lot on artificial intelligence to make decisions. Like database decisions can be easily created by algorithms and not people. And of course, there is some other aspects of the future work that needs to be considered as well, like flexible working hours, or even better, flexible working days, even if we have different cultures and different time zones. I would say this is my top 3. And yeah.
The last one touches upon autonomy, right? Like giving more autonomy to the people, right?
Yeah, exactly. If I can add one thing more, like hire more skills and less roles. We need people to solve problems, not just titles and roles.
Got it. Yeah, because people do get obsessed with titles as well. Like that's we've seen that.
Yeah, indeed. And the traditional way to learn things is changing. People do not go more to the university to learn. They learn on their house, YouTube or self-study. That's for sure going to change.
There's a great communities also now to learn from. Knowledge is everywhere now. It's up to you.
Exactly.
Great. Bran, your take on that. Top 2 or 3 trends that you see going big.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think what we see in software as well is that the world, there's things that we now have to do. I mean, you touched on it, Andre, as well, which is data science and machine learning is a part of our lives. So all the teams that and UX, I mean, again, you may be hired 10 years ago, maybe it was you hire a designer. Now design has to be built into the process, built into the team structure. So same with data science. I mean, and everyone has to recognize that, AI and data science just doesn't come for free. So it's something that has to be planned for and coordinated. So in some respects, I think the future of work, whether it's distributed or otherwise, is going to, in some respects, get more complicated, because now as software teams, we're expected to be able to have ML ops and have DevOps, and we're having design sprints and data science sprints all sort of integrated together. So in some respects, I think it's more complicated, but I think it's also now opens the door to, actually doing something real and really impactful. There's no question that whether it's again sort of async world or the otherwise, I think those things aren't going to change. So I think what I kind of love about it, we used to have a saying at Oracle that one of the great advantages to everyone is that we're all equally disadvantaged, in that everyone is remote, essentially. So we all have to figure it out. And I think what's kind of nice about this is that the future of work is distributed. So in a way, that rather than being sort of like, oh, I'm in Toronto, I wish I was at HQ so I could walk down the hall and talk to them, the reality was that we were all kind of all over the place. So we all had to figure it out. What I think the future is, this has forced everyone to figure it out. And I just love what Andre talked about, of being able to be precise in our communications and clear about our documentation and sort of directed about what we're trying to do and very purposeful. This is a future of work. So I think it sort of opens so many doors. I think we've talked about it, Shubham, about how you're seeing new opportunities emerge. And I see that as the true sort of how this industry is evolving. And it's really an exciting time.
Same here. Emily, your take on that?
I agree with both Brian and Andre. I think remote world is the future. And I think there are gonna be more software or technology that will empower that world. For example, one of the things I miss the most is be able to whiteboard, right? But now we have to do everything on OneDrive. So there's a lot of technology I see now can actually connect your tablet that you can draw on real time and show on the screen. So those are the things would practically there's going to be more software to empower the people to work remote, to communicate more efficiently. And there's going to be a lot more technology that no code software that just so the empower a business to say I want to achieve this and there's no code in between. But yes, it's still going to take engineers, it's going to take everybody to do that critical thinking and provide the product value. So
I think Facebook is listening. I think they're building the metaverse. Right? I think the point that you mentioned are getting heard, and they're building for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's so true. I mean, the things that I still miss, I miss whiteboards. Absolutely. I mean, it's always the thing. There's no really great replacement for a whiteboard standing in front of it. I mean, it just isn't. I mean, Zoom is better. I mean, obviously these conference calls are better. I can't wait. I mean, once we're all AR'd and VR'd into our things, maybe that'll be better. And I think there's still limitations on human interaction. And again, with the teams, I think Andre talked about as well, which was how do you make sure that people are present? How many people are part of these calls? How do you make sure that the meetings are relevant? And I think these are really tricky challenges where really if you're sitting in a conference room on a whiteboard, people are paying attention. If we're all kind of dialed into a status meeting, I mean, everyone's sort of it's snoozing and reading Twitter.
Totally agree on that from my friend as well. I think whiteboard is the biggest thing that you miss while sitting at home, right? When you're collaborating with your friends or even for colleagues, right? In my case, a lot of my friends are a part of Recro, so so you miss those discussions and brainstorming that happens on whiteboard. I think no amount of technology has been able to beat that. Let's see what Facebook is up to now. So
I would like to add another thing, though, not the future, but I think having sometimes if the company can afford it, having everybody in the same team have like a 1 week working session together, like in the same location, that will boost so much of that. How you call it?
So that depends on affordability as well in terms of, and
yes.
I think we are doing that to a certain extent at Recro. We do every month we have divided India into 4 parts, and we try to get people parties thrown, and we try to socialize people in each of these centers, and we ask them. Obviously, we have not mandated that, but what I feel like offsite that used to happen, right? I think that has now meanings more than ever, where you need people to come chill together and collaborate. I'm not sure in terms of how much work would happen on those offsites because people would be meeting after it's a long time. But I think those experiences are very, very critical when you have to build a cohesive team.
We're humans. We're people. I mean, I agree. I mean, as much as we talked about the efficiency of remote work, I mean, my favorite times was getting on an airplane, going to San Francisco, and hanging out with people. So absolutely, it is nothing replaces that.
Right. So I'll just take up some questions that have come up, like in terms of if we can quickly answer, and please okay, the first one is, what do you feel is the best way to optimize async communication, especially when you're dealing with multiple interdependent teams? Andre, if you would like to take a shot on that.
Single source of truth. Great, that type of documentation. And do not spread your business rule in several different documents. That will make it impossible to people to have a sync communication process.
Got it. I think that's the key takeaway for our team as well. Single source of truth. I keep on saying that, but great, Andre. The next one is.
I mean, I'll just echo that as well. I mean, and I mean, what that I think means is that the barrier to create that single source of truth has to be very low. So you have to be. So then this is sort of the anti-40-page PRD, MRD. I mean, you need to say, what do I need to make this decision? what is the minimal set of information? Let's do it. Let's agree to it. Let's move on. So where I think the challenge is when the door is open and you're continuing to iterate on these things and things are really fluid. So without that feedback and those checkpoints and that ability to say, yes, this is it, this is done, move on, I think is really the critical step that has to happen.
Great. Thanks, Brian. I'll move on to the next question. Zeva O'Brien, what needs to be done to build a remote ready technology infrastructure? Okay, so we're talking about remote tools here. Are any specific tools who would like to handle? Emily, any specific tools that you're handling?
We have everything from Jira, Zoom, obviously Slack. Slack integration is the best right now. You can have alert monitoring from your infrastructure, everything. So definitely Slack. And everything cloud already, right? Right now, all the startup actually don't have. I mean, it's dependent on your industry and how important you have to have on-prem, but everything on cloud-based would be pretty much ready. and you can get a VPN remote everywhere into any servers. Any other tools that we have? I always use G Suite, Google Drive, like share Drive and make sure it's private. Share like Draw.io or all of the diagram, swimdiagram.net. Those are the things that we use as well. Is there anything else, Andre, that we're using that I'm missing here?
That's pretty much everything. Cloud operations, Jira, Slack, and a lot of Google Drive, Google Documents, a lot.
I mean, I think the big one as well is, you got to pick one. I mean, I got to say, we had a Teams Slack debate. I mean, I still don't understand why, but I mean, there's the business team wanted Teams, engineering wanted Slack. I mean, there's many great tools. I've tried Coda. I mean, we've tried all the PM tools. I actually like Coda, but I mean, in the end, I standardized on Confluence and Jira just because it's simple, it's straightforward, people can have access to it, and it's standardized. So people got used to like not having SharePoint and G Drive, and so you weren't chasing things. It was always you have to pick one, and I think that's really it. The other thing is truly don't underestimate the investment costs of an AHA or a Monday or other things. In some respects, the simplest things often are the most effective.
Got it. And a couple of questions more. I think we can wrap. So one question here is that's come up in terms of is how do you leverage global talent pool? I think Emily did answer a bit in terms of using remote job boards and referrals. But are there any other sources as well where companies can go to tap global talent, and what are you guys using right now to tap into global tech talent? Brian, you can start if you would like.
So you're right. I mean, from a pure talent acquisition, I mean, the tools we have are the tools we have. I love, Emily, that you guys have gone straight to Ukrainian job boards. I mean, that's really brave. I mean, that's awesome. It's fabulous. But I mean, I think certainly tapping into remote services and team. Obviously, the Recros of the world, I mean, are great. I mean, they, as from a startup or even a mid-sized company, having access is huge. I'll take another little spin on that as well. I think we also have to be cognizant of the worldwide talent pool in terms of information sharing as well. So even something like the product Twitter universe, I think is something that has really found a real grounding over the last year or two, where you can now actually gain tremendous insights into behaviors, strategies, and whether it's data science or product or otherwise. I mean, Twitter has just kind of emerged as this great community for it. So I think as leaders, as operators, as managers, even however we are, recognizing that everyone around the world has a unique sort of take on and can provide guidance, I think is something we all have to be open to when we're trying to kind of solve these types of problems.
Yeah, Twitter as a hiring channel, right? Obviously, this is something unique, right? But I think a lot of recruiters are already on it, and there are specific ways of how do you go about hunting on Twitter. thing. So yeah, a very, very, very new channel, but you get a lot more behavioral insights coming in from Twitter, because based on the content and based on the way the guys, the kind of content the person is posting, or the kind of tweets or the kind of threads you're generating, right? So yeah, this it's just for developers that they become more and more visible, and give multiple signals out, right, to global companies. Uh,
I
yeah,
want to add a quick one on that. We also use, companies like Recro to source candidates. Hiring is hard because
Hiring.
sometimes we have thousands of candidates, and for me to, read all of everybody's resume is really, really challenging. So having a recruiting firm or a software development team is already kind of source these candidates, like make sure they are high quality before you send into in the inner channel, even before taking the test, would be like a great help for us, right? So the quality of the talent will be higher and less work.
And at least in high volume countries, at least in Southeast Asia, if you're looking for talent, right, be it India or be it Bangladesh or be it similar countries, right, there's a huge volume of, so I say it's like a DNS attack that happens once you post any job application. It justly bombards your recruiter's ability to probably process those many applications. So that's where we are trying to build certain systems, use technology to filter that out, and probably give you the end product coming out of it, which saves time on that side. But a very, very valid point that obviously companies like Recro and others would obviously have an important role to play to do that heavy lifting from there. Thanks. And one more question that has come up, thing is like a lot of companies due to work from home or I would say remote are facing a lot of attrition happening now. And you must have heard of, I will touch upon the Great Resignation, right? What could teams do now to basically ensure that, obviously, to bring down attrition rates in their particular organizations? And are there any specific steps that you have done? I think this is coming from Nikhil. I think this similar question came upwards as well from someone. So if you guys can help us understand a bit in terms of how what's your take on attrition? In India, it's very high right now. I think it's the highest. In US also, I've been reading about it. It's at close to around 45 plus kind of percentage people are resigning. So what's your take, right, Brand, if you would like to start?
It's brutal. I mean, it's because now our engineers are now getting Southern California offers, and I mean we're fighting with talent every step of the moment. I mean we've had 4 and 5 year people who just is it's just it's an enormous challenge that we run into, and I think it's just it's not going to go away, just because, especially for engineering, I think there's a fluidity about support. So if you're not ticking all the boxes, it's really hard. What I think it's not virtual games and virtual no one wants to spend any more time on Zoom than they have to. So I think it's the temptation to kind of fall into that and try to stopgap it there. I hate to say it, but I think it really does come down to trust and value of the people, your employees. I mean, if you're either doing a good job or you're not, you either feel like they're getting valued work or they're not. They either feel like they're growing professionally or they're not. So it's all the stuff that you kind of maybe shuffled away, and so the one-on-ones, the education, all the standard stuff that we're all supposed to do becomes critically important. And I think so in the end, you're going to lose if somebody gets a $500K on target deal from Facebook. You're going to lose that person anyway. But I mean,
that used to be early stage funding. That's a seed round.
Exactly. But I mean, the people you can keep, they can keep. But so which means that they have to be listened to. I mean, you have to, if they want to start learning TensorFlow, I mean, get them on a TensorFlow course. I mean, that's what it comes down to. So you have to be truthfully engaged with the people you work with, and I mean, you have to be real. And I think that's the hope for people trying to build and sustain the organizations.
Correct, and give them opportunities to grow, like very nicely you put it, right? So if you give them the opportunities to, obviously, autonomy again and again, secondly, give them a way to build mastery on different, and because engineers are like software engineers are knowledge workers, right? So we We can't be comfortable with one stack or one framework or particular. You can't define that for us, and world is changing. So if you give them that growth, I think that really adds up to people respecting those companies which value certain upskilling in a particular sense, right? Andre, your take on that? Like, what's your take? Like, how do you reduce attrition? How do you handle attrition in the current job market?
Resonate with I resonate with Brian on trust. We have first to trust everyone. Like if we're hiring those people, we trust them, and then we have to listen a lot, and make actions on top of that. Just listen is not enough. You have to make something, and make sure that's visible to everyone, because some people are just so shy they cannot tell what is wrong. And once you make it visible to everyone, they can emphasize with someone else's pain, and then we can take proper actions.
Or a lot of developers in that sense, I'm not stereotyping, but again, we have seen patterns in terms of there are a lot of people who are very much introvert in nature, and very rightly you put up, they would not come out and blatantly tell you like what's the problem, and it's very important that you said like listen and act. Otherwise, it just becomes a one-way communication where people are saying, but and eventually they stop saying as well if you don't act. So mechanisms to build transparency in terms of, for example, we had this thing where one of our team was feeling very much pressured. We did a survey, we got the listening, and we have automated surveys now, right, where you can get to know the pulse of people. And we got this feedback where they were under very high pressure and there was something that was not right. And what we did is, just after listening, we created a sheet which was transparent and it was applicable to everyone. And we said, okay, leadership team, this manager is responsible for this task, and put a simple Google sheet and just put all the tasks there and say, okay, this is how we are performing. This is the end date by which we think we could do it. And you can go to that tracker anytime and look at and hold us accountable. So I think building transparency along with, and what Andre mentioned, listening and acting, and a little bit adding a little bit of transparency of where the progress is, because not everything could be done in a day, right? So, but keeping people aware of what's going on, I think that also adds to a bit of building trust in the organization. Great. I think we had a great session today, and a lot of insights that have come out. I think we are in time now. So thanks everyone. Thanks Brian. Thanks Emily, Andre, for taking out time and sharing your experiences with us. It was a tremendous experience in terms of getting insights from different parts of the world. Brian joining from Toronto, Andre from metadata, Emily again bringing the engineering perspective into this. So a lot of gratitude for you guys for coming and sharing your views and insights with us.
So it was a wonderful discussion with everyone. Once again, I would like to thank Andra, Emily, and Brian for joining us. Thank you, Shubham, as well, for hosting it wonderfully. Thank you once again to all the panelists for joining us. It was lovely having you. And thanks to the audience for the lovely questions that you have had. And I hope you guys had a good time. So yeah, thanks again for joining us. I hope to see you guys in the next one.